Welcome to the Gunpla Network. I'm Murdoch, and this is 5 Minute Mecha, where I've got 5 minutes to give you the rundown on a mech. Wait a minute. That's not 5 minutes, is it? Nah, so more like the Amuro Power Hour. Today we're looking at the RX-93 Nu Gundam. No, not that. I said the Nu Gundam. No, the real Nu Gundam. Perfection. Okay, so what's up with this thing? Right? Surprise! Time for a history lesson. This is what the original concept of the Nu Gundam was back in, wait for it, 1987. When Tomino's original Mobile Suit Gundam, Char's Counterattack novel, was first published in the magazine Animage. Pretty sure I'm pronouncing that right. Don't come at me in the comments too hard. It would eventually be renamed to Mobile Suit Gundam High Streamer, but still followed most of the story beats of the CCA we know and love. But remember, this was the first iteration of this story. The rewriting of CCA, now called High Streamer to differentiate it, that Tomino proposed is actually the story we would come to know as Beltochika's Children. The suits at Sunrise did not like this revised story, which is why Tomino would release it later as its own novel, and went back to High Streamer's narrative. The character art was pretty fabulous, and the idea behind the story was solid, but at this point I can only make an educated guess from what I've found, but it seems these machine designs may have been the brainchild of the art director of the time, Yukinobu Hoshino. Now, I want to make something clear before we go further. I'm not throwing shade on this work, okay? It's still a masterful telling, and the visuals are pretty darn stunning. But before you take to the comments at me for this, the important point to remember here is that from what is now 36 years ago at the point of this recording, and now I feel really old all of a sudden, the Gundam look, as we know it, wasn't solidified as a concept yet, okay? Grandpa set RX-78 laid the foundation and the Mark II followed suit, but those follow-up series weren't called Gundam Mark II, were they? The Zeta Gundam took a wildly different approach to how its aesthetic should be in its mechanical designs, and at the time, in 85, 86 or so, the production company Sunrise and their toy-making partner / overlord Bandai were dealing with how they could compete with the smash hit that was Super Dimension Fortress Macross. I mean, have you seen the VF-1 Valkyrie? That's some serious transforming hardware there. Okay, back on topic. The Gundam look wasn't a concrete thing yet in those years, and ZZ Gundam was hit with a lot of, mixed reviews, so that didn't count for much. And you also had other publications like Gaia Gear, which also did some radical things, including the one true Char clone in a Francia Char. If you want to try and tell me different, I'll wait. There we go again. Point is, once the suits decided to commit to doing Char's Counterattack, they needed to re-Gundamify, if that's even a word. I just made it up, whatever. The aesthetic. So, naturally, that meant certain folk, like Kunio Okawara, would be brought back into the fold to figure out how to make the Nu look like a Gundam again. One of the early concepts that can be found on the wiki should be kind of familiar looking, and also served as the basis for what would become the High Nu and Beltochika's Children. After a bit more trial and error, we get the look we all know and love. From what I understand, High Streamer focused more and more on the insane high-speed, killer G-force, sudden start and stop combat that just, it gets to the point where even a willing suspension of disbelief, it, even with one of those, you know, it might start to feel a little far-fetched. And then they made Gundam Wing like 7 years later. So anyway, it was decided to play with the psychic remote weapon concept of the attack funnels more. And this led to the formula that made the Nu Gundam we have now. So before we jump to other iterations like the slightly more demure Izubushi concept, or the slightly bizarre Obari stylized version, or the absolutely bonkers Brave Battler Senshi Musha Samurai version, or the Super Saiyan capable Hajime Katoki Ver Ka iteration, complete with Psychoframe coursing through its whole body. Psychoframe video coming soon. Let's look at what this iconic hero is packing in its standard appearance and loadout. Alright, at the top of its head, the Nu Gundam stands at 22 meters tall, make it 23 if you include the V-fin antennae sticking out above that. Given its construction and armor materials, it's surprisingly light for its size, only weighing 63 metric tons fully fueled and armed with its complete loadout. While it comes with 26 vernier thrusters and apogee motors loaded into it, the combined thrust of the rocket propulsion on this machine only gets it to a max acceleration of about 1.5 Gs, which frankly isn't that impressive if you consider the Gundam Mark II could achieve that and was considered obsolete by the time the first Neo-Zeon War had even begun. But that's okay, since then, you know, other technological improvements had been made. Partly why the Nu is so light for its size. Its onboard sensor suite could detect things as far as a 21.3 kilometer radius around it. There we go. And that wonderful material called Psychoframe. But that's just it. Unless you're looking at Katoki's version, historically, only the Nu's cockpit was lined with this stuff, and not having bits of it throughout the torso and its adjacent parts. As I'll cover in more detail in another video, the Federation didn't initially have access to Psychoframe technology. Char, or rather Casval Daikun, decided he would allow Anaheim to leak that technology to the Federation because he wanted to make sure that when he killed Amuro in a future duel, neither of them was being held back by their machine, because he had this weird sense of fair play for that. Yeah, his ego might have swelled a bit there. With that out of the way, the application of Psychoframe around the cockpit was pretty liberal, and the engineers made sure to integrate it into the Psychomu system. And I say liberal here, but what I really mean is, you know, they used most of what the Earth Federation forces could actually procure the stuff in one shot. Wow. All that to say, the rest of the machine operated on you know, armor plating on movable frame principle. The Federation was still pretty wary of Psychomu systems and Nu types after all. The cockpit, minus the Nu type space magic interface, was, you know, basically EFF standard. Panoramic cockpit. In previous test models, namely the RX-90 Nu Gundam, and the the RX-9 narrative, they had tried things without Psychoframe, and even attempted another core block design. The findings with these test beds were that there was too much input lag as far as Amuro was concerned, so they opted for an escape pod ball instead. Then, they released the test beds that did incorporate Psychoframe and some Psychomu. And these were the PX00531 Nu pre-test type, and the Silver Bullet test type. That's four. 4 different machines were made to produce the Nu Gundam. But the thing with the Silver Bullet test type, it wasn't true true Psychomu yet, right? Because it still used the Incom wire frame. And in some tests that was Nitro, but that's another thing altogether. In terms of weapons, oh boy, the Nu has weapons all right. Almost everything but nukes and the anime kitchen sink find their way onto this thing. Okay. Not quite. But I got a laundry list here. So, like just about every Federation machine, we got the linked dual 60mm Vulcan cannons in the head. The primary beam saber kept in the backpack is also known as the custom saber, or rather custom beam saber, as its pommel has a short beam saber emitter in it as well. The new spare beam saber would be mounted to a charge slot on its left forearm, and this configuration would become standard across subsequently mass-produced machines. Like the J-Sta. Because that thing doesn't scream Special Forces. The Nu's beam rifle, compared to other crazy weapons we've seen in previous conflicts leading up to this point, is rated at a modest output of 3.8 megawatts. It also has a 3-round burst mode and full auto settings. It also sported what would be conflicting mentions of either, and then both, an independent aiming device and grenade launcher mounted to the rifle above the barrel. Nu Gundam also has its own Hyper Bazooka, dubbed the Nu Hyper Bazooka. It too would be adopted as a new armament standard going forward, and used a 5-round magazine. The Nu's shield sports Amuro's battle emblem, the Unicorn A, as well as packing 4 missiles and a beam cannon for that surprise, suckers! Action. As much as you would think a high-end machine like this would need an eye field generator mounted into the shield like successor models, Unicorn, that's where Anaheim's R&D department truly did shine. The Nu Gundam sports a standard loadout of 6 fin funnels, model designation AAV PFF93AR. These babies fold into a U shape when they attack, and the fins actually act as electromagnetic rails to accelerate and fire megaparticles. Oh, did I mention the fin funnels use a very fancy megaparticle launcher setup? Under the old terminology, they resemble more bits than funnels in that they have their own built-in generators rather than E-caps like more modern funnels that, say, the other guys have. On top of this, because the fin funnels can vary their EM field geometry, when they link together, they can use the megaparticles to form a primitive beam shield. I know, it wasn't primitive at the time. It was actually insane if you think about it. But here's the part that's actually insane, okay? If somebody else's Psychomu-operated funnels pass through this barrier, it could actually generate physiologically damaging psychic feedback because of the psychowave interference. Think about that for a minute. Your funnel passes through this thing and you get brain damage from it. That's how ridiculous these things are. On top of that, because the unique design of the fin funnels, they had their own little AMBAC system coded into them to help their thrusters and movement in space, making them as agile as any other attack funnels in spite of their very big size. Because of the Psychoframe's integration in the Nu, Amuro's fin funnels will practically react to his instincts, let alone his conscious thoughts. At one point in the second Neo-Zeon War, generally considered to be, a crucial one late in the game, the Nu also straight up stole Agera Doga's beam machine gun from it in the final duel against Char and the Sasabi. Other useful technology features include your standard space emergency kit in the form of birdline launchers to seal holes in space colonies and stop infantry and tanks in their tracks, as well as inflatable dummy launchers. Fantastic tactic which was implemented and adopted earlier in the UC-80s. So, now as to how this Gundam came about, a lot of it had to do with Char's return to the spotlight and starting the Second Neo-Zeon War. And really just planting those seeds for it once again in what would be the events of Nu Gundam. Amuro went through several new high-end mobile suits, from the Rick DJ all the way to the Riga Z, just not faring as well as he would have liked in order to, truly beat a threat to his old rival, and felt that Char wasn't taking him seriously as an appointment due to that either. During this time, it seems Anaheim was more than happy to make new machine after new machine, acting as different technology test beds for Amuro to try out as the conflicts continued on. So, after Londo Bell failed to stop 5th Luna from being dropped on Lhasa in Tibet, Amuro decided he was going to actually dedicate some time to designing his own machine to make use of his abilities. In High Streamer, this turned into this high-speed monster. But this is mainstream Char's Counterattack. So, through means not entirely well explained, whether it was their new type space magic connection or through his spy network, Char Aznable got wind of this intent, as I mentioned earlier, chose to allow Anaheim Electronics to use Psychoframe technology for use in what would become the Nu Gundam. After that, well, go watch Char's Counterattack and giggle about the English dub's mistranslation of the Titans when referring to the Titans. Just be sure to have some tissues ready too, because it's a Gundam story and there's plenty of tragedy and PTSD for everybody. Just ask Hathaway. That's it for this episode. I'll see you in the next one.